Greetings, Culture Warriors. It is I, Jeffrey R., the author of Culture is Everything, and your host for this latest dispatch from the front. More bad news today, I'm afraid. The hits just keep on coming in this scamdemic. This story for you from Bloomberg by Hanna Hoikala. Sweden's biggest bank says cost cuts to hit 1,000 employees. Svenska Handelsbanken AB unveiled a series of cost cuts as part of a digital revamp it says will affect about 1,000 employees. Sweden's biggest bank intends to almost half its branch network, which has long been a hallmark of its business model, according to a statement on Wednesday. At the same time, management will invest about 1 billion kroner, that's about $114 million, in technology, it said. These changes will help us to lower our costs, Handelsbanken said. It expects the shift to a more digital service to bring its customer offering to an entirely new level. Shares in the Stockholm-based bank rose as much as 3.5%, propelling Handelsbanken close to the top of Bloomberg's index of European financial stocks. It is an obvious and likely overdue decision, given that so much of especially retail banking has moved digitally, Roy Tilley, an analyst at Arctic Securities, said by email. He also pointed out that the plan isn't without risks. Handelsbanken has as many branches in Sweden as Swedbank, SEB, and Nordea combined. It's going to be a challenge to scale down this much and this quickly, especially given the strong culture in Handelsbanken of a local presence and branch autonomy. The announcement comes just one day after Handelsbanken's investors learned that its regulator was forcing management to recalculate loan book risk. Analysts at Bloomberg Intelligence estimate the decision could wipe up to 160 basis points off the bank's common equity Tier 1 ratio, a key measure of capital strength. Shares in Handelsbanken fell 5% on Tuesday after the announcement. Handelsbanken said the latest plan to reduce its workforce, which comes on top of previously announced cuts, will take roughly 2 years. Negotiations and consultations are being initiated immediately with relevant trade unions, it said. Handelsbanken will need to make a provision in the fourth quarter of around 1.5 billion kroner, it said. The changes are the result of the Swedish part of the review of the entire bank's business operations, which was announced last autumn, it said. With an increasingly challenging revenue outlook for Swedish banks, Handelsbanken is taking a sensible approach in cutting costs through lower branch numbers and headcount reductions. The SEK 20 billion 2022 expenses target pre-Octogonen allocations appears to be 7.8% below current consensus, but that will be offset by lost revenue, SEK 1 billion, and IT investment, SEK 1 billion, to achieve that. Given the increased investments into the remaining branches and technology, Tilley at Arctic said Handelsbanken can still maintain a strong local presence and support its customers. Overall, we view it as a positive. It's going to be a difficult process with several important stakeholders, but SHB has had issues with cost inflation and underinvestment in IT that need to be addressed in our view. He said the bank's new targets could add 5 to 6% to consensus operating profit for 2022, 2023, so that is positive. What to make about this Byzantine mix of banking lore here? Well, a couple of things, I think. Overall, and especially during the pandemic, we've seen a greater move to online banking. And when they say digital, that's really what they mean, right? But that online banking move doesn't come for free. Number one is not all customers are equally comfortable with online banking. You think in particular of your elderly customers who like the comfort of going into a bank and talking to somebody. Also, you look at it in terms of people who aren't active in the workforce enjoy being able to go in and interact with people. It's an artifact, I think, of the not so long ago days where you would cash your paycheck at the bank. I can well remember my parents going into the bank to do just that, going into the bank to fund their Christmas club or withdraw money for that. Christmas club was where you put in a little bit of your paycheck every week, and then by the time Christmas came, you had a little nest egg that you could use to buy Christmas presents. And particularly if you were in an up or down business where things might get tight, it was a good way to ensure that you would have some money for Christmas presents, and that was something that we children certainly appreciated, even if we didn't fully understand it. So you get used to interacting with people at your local branch, and that behavior can carry for quite some time. Also, because of fears of having money electronically stolen from you in that electronic bank robbing scheme that we know as phishing or spoofing, well, banks are under constant attack from such organized criminals because, in the words of one famous 19th century bank robber, that's where the money is. So when you look at online banking increases, well, it makes it that much more difficult. It puts that much more strain on your systems. And it can be very expensive, not just to put them in place, but to maintain them. So you have to close a large number of branches in order to pay a couple of IT geeks to constantly monitor and make sure that your system is secure. Because otherwise, you're going to wind up with a lot of money going out the door in the form either of insurance or in lost customer goodwill, et cetera, et cetera. So the digital move is certainly not free, and where it's not in the core competency of the bank, it makes it that much more difficult because they're going to have problems. There is a play to be had here that I don't see many banks taking advantage of, but as other banks pull out of the teller branch system, some banks should start, especially the smaller credit union kind of banks, really ought to look into maintaining and expanding those. Because as I said, you've got a fairly sizable customer segment that prefers to interact with the bank that way. I mean, if you're looking for a loan approval, do you want to do it over the internet where it seems like it's intrusive? You're sharing a lot of very sensitive information with somebody you can't see. Or do you want to go into your local branch and sit down with someone that knows you, that you've seen many times throughout the years? It seems like you're just more comfortable in that kind of setting. So, and on top of that, of course, bankers tend to hire within their local community. So chances are the people that you're working with are your neighbors. It's a much more local, much more human interaction than you're going to get online banking. Now, the fact of the matter is I don't have a branch of my bank near me. I bank online as a result. And being an engineer, I don't much miss personal interaction on such things. In fact, I only darken the doors of my local branch generally when I had a problem. So for me, this move is just fine. But we're leaving behind a pretty sizable segment of the population. And a smart banker will figure out a way to serve that group in the manner to which they're accustomed. Maybe that means the branches are smaller in footprint. Although I would think that given how many people are getting out of them, you can probably get some good deals on real estate. So things might have to change. Perhaps they're drive-through only. But at least, in that little bit of exposure you get during a drive-through experience, perhaps that would be sufficient. People would be more comfortable. I don't know. But it's something that you have to look at. Clearly, Handelsbanken is valuing profit over its customers. It is stepping away from its business model. Now, does the move to digital always and everywhere have to mean a terrible customer experience? No, it doesn't. But you have to invest in it. You have to innovate. You have to make that interaction as strongly positive as possible. And I don't think very many banks in particular have found the secret sauce for doing that. When you open up an online banking portal, you are generally overwhelmed with information. It's hard for me, and I was in banking for 10 years, to decipher what comes at me sometimes through that online banking channel. And I think that has to change. You've got to have a little bit more of a guided tour through what the bank has to offer, I think, than is being provided today. But that said, there are a lot of banks out there. Everyone's trying to figure this out. And as soon as somebody does, as soon as somebody figures out a way to give a fantastic experience to the customer, better than they could get when you walk in face to face in the branch, it's going to be game over. It will be game over. So let's see how that goes into the future. You can't just keep slapping digital on something and acting like you have a strategy. We got to see how you're using that information to better the experience your customers have. We'll see how it turns out. But for those 1,000 people impacted by these cuts, I have a feeling that the short-term pain is going to exceed the long-term gain that the bank is going to get out of it. That's all I have for today. Have a great day.